Welcome to the Meta Business Innovation and Technology Podcast. Conversations with industry leaders on new trends and products that can grow your business. In today's episode, host Jordan Rogers Smith had a discussion on the importance of creative in performance marketing with our guest co-host, Chiwei Lee, Director, America's Creative Shop at Meta, and our guest, Philip Buerger, co-founder of TubeScience. Philip and Chiwei share their insights on how creative content has evolved from a mere aspect of marketing to the backbone of performance, driving engagement and achieving desired outcomes for advertisers. They discuss the shift to short-form video, the role of creators, and the strategies for maintaining creative diversity and freshness to avoid audience fatigue while learning how to stay ahead in the ever-changing digital landscape.
You are listening to the Meta Business Innovation and Technology Podcast. I'm your host, Jordan Rogers Smith, and if you want to learn from industry leaders about new trends and products that can grow your business, then this is the podcast for you. Today, I'm joined by Philip Buerger, co-founder and chief strategy officer of TubeScience, and Chiwei Lee, North American Creative Shop Director here at Meta. Today, we're going to be discussing the importance of creative in performance marketing, and we'll jump straight into it. So Philip, welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
It's very nice to be here. I'm Philip, co-founder of TubeScience. We grew TubeScience at one of the largest creative agencies on Meta, learning right now from $1.8 billion in annual spend. When my co-founder and I discovered very early on that in an algorithmic world, targeting becomes creative. We've built a company that really helps those advertisers build those highly diversified ad portfolios in a very systematic and data-driven way.
Fantastic. Well, welcome to the show. And Chiwei, tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks. As you said, I'm part of a team called Creative Shop, and we really work with the biggest clients with Meta to help them originate from culture, collaborate with culture, and build at the speed of culture. And I've led a bunch of different verticals from auto, entertainment, technology, financial services, and so on. And yeah, incredibly excited for this conversation to help our clients improve the performance of their campaigns.
Fantastic. Well, welcome to the podcast. Well, Philip, I'm going to jump straight in with this sort of question statement to yourself. So with everything that's been going on in the shift in the industry over the last couple of years, really from static to full-on video, like how has creative content moved from not just being an aspect of marketing, but really the backbone of performance and how you drive engagement for advertisers and the outcomes that they're looking for? Like, how have you approached that from TubeScience's perspective?
Yeah, so I remember when we got started, most advertisers reached out to us and asking us for just volume. So they realized that creative burns out in digital compared to TV, and they needed a much higher volume of ads. But then also they realized that the feed was increasingly becoming video, and most of the performance was coming from static ads. And so they were looking for a partner that can make video ads also hit their performance goals. But over time, that with creator marketplaces and lots of influencers and advertisers being able to build mostly UGC testimonial ads, that was kind of more and more a solved problem. And so over time, we've now seen clients more reaching out to us because they are looking for specific creative diversity in their portfolio. So basically, then realize that they need to make ads going after all the different growth opportunities, whether it's different audiences, whether it's different product categories, but also different concepts, different visual styles, different messaging styles for different placements, conversion funnel. And so that became now kind of more of the focus point where clients look for help, saying, okay, how do we go beyond just static testimonial ads and really diversify that portfolio?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think that this big shift was really driven by the shift to short form video, right? With Reels. Obviously, Meta's up to 3.5 billion Reels seen every day. And I think that's driving this big shift, right? That Philip was talking about is like, okay, with this huge wave of video on the platforms, driving demand from our advertisers, the need for a ton of video for their campaigns. I think that's why we're seeing such a amazing shift here. And Philip loved that the fact that TubeScience is at the forefront of helping our clients here.
And Philip, one of the things that I know you spend a lot of time thinking about is, as you said, sort of audience fatigue and burnout and refreshing creatives quickly. Like, why has that become even more important when you think about auction dynamics and prices and reach in recent times? Like, what are you seeing out there, and sort of how has that impacted how you approach the strategy when it comes to fatigue and creative?
Yeah. So the fatigue part we stayed equally important actually from the beginning on. So like it's just that after I think Meta says more than 4 impressions, your probability to convert an audience is going down. In a world where people can skip any ad, you need to present them with something that looks new or takes a different angle to get their attention again and have a second shot at converting them. And that's where this burnout comes from, and that's why it's important to keep on refreshing your content, to find different angles to say the same things that have proven already to work, to just give those repeated, effective touch points with your audience. But I think what I've seen now evolving more is the more granular approach of saying, okay, like advertisers really understood the benefit of increasing auction liquidity by having really like tailored content that has a much better chance of participating in more auctions and has also better chance of winning auctions because they have more tailored content for those audiences that would see those ads. And so I see more kind of an involvement of versus having like just a few swim lanes of creative, now expanding them, having many, many more swim lanes, while all of those need to be kept fresh all the time. And so we're looking at some burnout metrics, and then having basically playbooks and saying, okay, how do we make more of something that has been working for that specific opportunity pocket?
Yeah, that's what we're seeing with our engagements with clients too. Is they, I mean, obviously there's this clear recognition that both creative diversity and multiple creatives in the campaign is important, but also the ability to refresh creative over time. How are you seeing your advertisers adapt their production approach to kind of manage this new influx of creative, Phil?
So when I look at what in-house teams have been doing, I've seen them pushing very hard in creator-led content. That has been like the easiest enabler for them to get large amounts of video content that are SPR optimized. It makes it relatively easy to go after different audiences because just by whatever creator is being used in the ad, it already is tailored more towards a specific subgroup of your market. Um, but that's usually where I see it stopping. And so as a result, what I've often seen now is that a ad portfolio is increasingly getting mid to bottom funnel heavy because testimonials are very, very effective DR ads, but they're not always the best concept to really bring the most top of the funnel, like people that are really not in market, and are not even problem aware or not even looking for kind of like any of the product categories. And so that's where we then see them reaching out and looking for other creative partners that can expand beyond testimonials and statics for example, um, more top of funnel suitable concepts like informational content, like useful information, hacks and tips, like anything that gets people to pay attention even though they're not in market. Character-led stories, more kind of like brand explainers that really
Yeah,
start at the beginning on why you should consider buying the product, or very problem-focused ads that explain you about, oh, if you have that problem, you maybe have
yeah.
never thought of this product as a solution for it, but might be worth considering.
Yeah, it's interesting. We love obviously working with creators because they are experts, right? At I think you mentioned it to me earlier on, right? The language of reels, and um, uh, creating these different story types is what we call what you're describing. You know, the listicles and Q&As and stuff like that. What we find is yes, that's really effective, but sometimes it's a little tricky to get clients to, we call it, release the grip, and let them be creative with these things. And what we find is when they do, they see better performance. Uh, are you seeing like the data on the backside, when you work with creators, to increase performance and reduce wear out? The campaigns you are working on with the clients, right, are when they start to work with creators and use these story types, are you seeing that performance improvement on your side?
It's a really effective way of expanding on your ad portfolio, and again, like, it's something that is relatively easy to do by yourself. So, like, when I talk to advertisers that are just about to build their own in-house teams and are more also on the smaller side, it's like probably the number one recommendation I have for them is like, go after creators. It's a very solid starting point. Again, like, if it comes to that goal of getting um, engaging, socially native, but also converting creative, that you can create at scale. But yeah, like, I see more like a bit of a skew towards more of the bottom to mid funnel audience that are particularly this is effective for. You need to find really um, a not broad engaging, but like kind of like very like eh, like engaging openers that capture people's attention that are not really right now in market yet, and that's a bit harder with creator content. Like, it's a bit easier to really have problem focused or even like useful information kind of content, and that's not always as easily executed by creators because it requires quite a bit of finesse to find something that doesn't feel like a bait and switch and that is truly value adding and truly useful information,
Yeah.
but that authentically um, um, prepares the sales pitch in the ad, so that it can like authentically follow that piece of useful information that initially gets people's attention.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say to you, and I love, as someone who's worked, extensively with some of the largest brands across, Meta's platforms, like creators is one way that we can, solve this problem of creative liquidity in a sense, being able to do this at scale in a reasonably
Right.
low touch fashion. But sort of what are the other areas that you see other teams or other advertisers leverage when it comes to this challenge of, creative is a generally expensive problem to have, to always have always on creative, can be quite timely, can be quite expensive. How do you navigate those conversations with advertisers who sort of have those reservations or concerns really about how to do this and stay relevant if they've got time crunched, restricted budgets in this area?
Yeah. We see kind of three broad tracks, right? We talked about the first one is creators obviously bring a lot to the table, and that's a really powerful solution. The second is, we have a really powerful ecosystem of MVPs, like production partners with all different kinds of uh, ways of business models, right? So sometimes it's one-off creative, sometimes it's subscription models like TubeScience, and that's they're fast, they're pretty affordable when you think about what they can deliver. I love the performance model that TubeScience brings. We also have monthly, like, deliver a certain amount of video, and we find a lot of clients get a lot of value from that. Um, the third is probably the heaviest lift of, like, building out that internal capability. But we find that you don't have to go overboard, right? Like, there are so many powerful tools, both on the app side, but also being developed on the partner side, that allow internal teams to kind of deliver these things at a faster and more effective way. And even AI, which, we're not talking about like some of the visionary stuff that's really obviously really exciting, but some of the simple stuff to, like, refresh backgrounds and add overlays and things like that. Those are kind of the three broad areas that we see our partners really leaning into.
I think one part thinking more about this also, like, what is really important when you want to work with creators is creatives are a really great source of like cost effective, like again, like consumer centric, diverse content. But when you want to be successful at particularly at scale, it's really important that you have a um, iteration and scaling strategy so that once you find a winning ad, that you know what to do next and how do you really exploit a winning ad, whether it is through refreshes, but also through expansions and adaptations to maybe different opportunities. And so that requires a central kind of brain that is managing that and making sure that okay, we have one hit. What do we do next, and how do we leverage this and turn this into other ads that are more likely to work because it's leveraging what's working. And so also there's something that I sometimes see is that clients who are creator content, they have like a one hit, but then it stops there, and then they maybe reuse that sometimes. But this very strategic exploitation of a win is not happening enough, which requires more is like this strategist that is at the brand side or at an agency side that manages this iteration process and thinks also about how to use maybe some of the assets even of a creator in a different kind of format of an ad. So that's one part. And the other part, what also requires, I think, a strong strategist on the back end is being very principled in the way how we explore, right? Like, so you need to make sure that all the different creative for your commission is going after the actual most promising growth opportunities that you have. And you need to be very consumer centric, research driven, but also data driven in the account to understand where are those, rather than just sourcing a bunch of cheap content and throwing it basically against the wall and see what sticks, where you will very quickly see your testing costs are just going to get unmanageable.
Yeah. When we look at our most advanced advertisers on the platform, they've really created this very streamlined, always on learning creative process, right? And so it's like making sure you're baking in and scoping for right highly performant creative tactics before you start production, right? And then you can pick any of the production techniques that we just talked about, but a huge bottleneck oftentimes we see, maybe slightly skewed towards larger clients, is then how do you quickly approve? Release the grip is what we talk about, right? It's like, let it run, see the data, hold the creative teams accountable for that data, and then flywheel starts again, right? It's like then you create and improve and create, improve. Philip, that's what I'm hearing you also describe. And are you seeing some real success there when clients adopt this kind of process?
Yeah, I think the number one thing to do to be able to push towards performance is getting clarity on your brand guardrails. I would not call them actually guidelines. I call them more guardrails.
Yeah.
More clearly those guardrails are defined, the better you're setting up a performance creative partner like us, but also even a creator to push as far as possible into performance. And so that's actually something that I'm still surprisingly having to work a lot on with clients in terms of is that clarity of brand guardrails.
Yeah.
And there are very specific areas that we by now know. Okay, we need to know like not only font and color, but we also need to know messaging do's and don'ts, or we need
Yeah.
to know the requirements on set design or whatever it is. And if you define that option space and can be very clear within it, I think you have a way better chance to then it increase your velocity in testing because you can you get for your notes, you can get like create ads live faster, but also you just allow that creative to push the boundaries because they know,
Sure.
all right, here's where I need to stop.
Sure. Yeah. I know, like, when we've done internal studies, right? Like, when we talk about, like, people are always asked, like, how different is creative differentiation, right? It's pretty substantial. It can't just be like changing the color, right? Like, it has to fundamentally feel like some real difference, so that someone who isn't in advertising looks at it and goes, oh, I definitely see that difference, right? And that's how you keep your creative fresh, and performant over time. So that makes so much sense.
And the other part, what I have to think about when you right now talk about, for example, what does actually creative diversity mean? I think there's also a lot of education still that can be done because creative diversity has so many different dimensions. And it's important if you think of a diversified ad portfolio to expand across all of them. Most people just think when it comes to creative diversity in terms of concept diversity or visual diversity. But
Yes.
there's also what I call audience diversity, right? So am I actually diversifying across all touch points that I can have with an audience? That is across placements, that is
Yes.
across stages of the conversion funnel. Am I diversifying across messaging approaches? Because people respond to different sales
Yeah.
uh, pitches differently. Some people
Sure.
are the more skeptical consumers. Um, some people are the early adopters. Like, how do you like create enough diversity in the ad portfolio to also go after those different audiences out there that care about or have different decision making styles?
Yeah.
Uh,
It makes me think about what you said at the beginning, right? Creative is the new targeting, right? And having that creative diversity it's actually a business imperative, right? It ensures that you're reaching all of your customers and even some of the customers that you may not be thinking about. One of my favorite examples is there's a menswear brand, right? Obviously, they thought they were targeting men because that's who were buying their products, but they found that a pretty substantial proportion of the conversions were coming from women. Makes sense, right? So sometimes women are buying gifts for men. Um, but that's where the right creative to reach the right audiences becomes a really key part of not only driving conversion, but also to grow your business. And in this environment, growth is everything.
it's funny. We have a very similar client that does like where we extended them. It was like the other way around. So it's a like um what like so actually the same. Sorry, like a menswear brand, but has not been selling at all to women. And we started opening up a significant amount of women customers, and it was coming through that first consumer research part of like who are the people buying it? Looking at the reviews and testimonials, seeing that there's actually women buying. Why are they buying? And then being very deliberate and trying to open up that audience with tailored content.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's always fun to see when you target broader and when you see the delivery really shifting to whatever you
sure.
planning it to shift by just changing the creative.
Philip, taking that as an example of sort of having to explore a new market with a new set of creative, like how did you approach that when it came to actually thinking about, okay, how do we test this? How do we make sure we don't waste a bunch of money here going down an avenue that might not necessarily perform great? And sort of what was the process you went through to begin to match the audience to the creative and iterate into something that was a success at the end?
Well, I suspect Philip and I are going to have similar answers. They didn't start that way, right? They started with like like generalized creative, and the important thing is to start to really look for insights in the delivery and conversions of that data, right? And then once you start to see that, that starts to inform your creative brief and allows you to build different creative to kind of explore the range of possibilities, right? So we're talking about menswear, but it could be like cats and dogs or different kind of meals or I did a lot of auto work. It could be EVs or trucks and things like that. Is like the, it's if you populate at the end of the day, our ad delivery system is a really sophisticated machine. If you fuel the machine in the right way, you're going to get incredibly insightful and powerful results. Sorry, Philip. Would love to hear your point of view on this.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. I think the only like, and you already start talking about beyond just so the first part you talked about like, okay, can you see it in your current in the current data of your account, right? Like, can you see where currently your ads are delivering? And maybe you did a few initial tests and see success. But then you also mentioned like learning across industries, right? And so that's what I mean with IP driven, but basically figuring out, okay, we have known a specific technique of gifting, for example, right? As you mentioned with the menswear brand, is a really effective technique to open up a completely different audience as a potential customer. If you've seen that working in one account, you will recognize quickly in other accounts the same opportunity. And again, it's like, at least it's grounded though in some success that actually happened. And then the third, which we would add to the two that you mentioned, would be consumer research, right? Like, so understand your consumers, go deep there, read the comment on the ads, analyze as many reviews and customer codes as you can, and really get into the heads there and see whether you can find new hypotheses of like new customers that seem to be like great customers because they have bought in the past, but that we have not made custom content for. I think with the consumer research part, you have to be a little bit strategic also of thinking about, is the TAM worth it? Like, are there enough people out there? Is your product differentiated enough that you think you can convert more, or was it just a unicorn customer experience that you're analyzing and seeing? So that's, I think, where the bit of this marketing strategy comes in. But I think all in all, it's really important to be hypothesis driven when you are expanding diversity, because otherwise you're going to go very quickly down that rabbit hole, on a path of creating a ton of content, but you're wasting a lot of your testing budget testing like uninformed or random content. And I think in nowadays world where cost of content becomes cheaper and cheaper, that risk is going up, right?
Yeah.
Like before, when content was costing you a lot, you were forced to be careful about what content to make. Nowadays, if you think, oh, it's a few $100s and I get like a testimonial for it, it's basically for free. But actually it's not, because people are overlooking that hidden cost of testing that is way, way bigger than the creative cost. And so we have to be as principled nowadays than we have had to be before, even though content cost came down.
Yeah. You talk about cost of, I mean, not just obviously testing, but doing business. Um, look, the other thing that I would encourage everybody to think about, right, as they think about their campaigns, is just making sure they have good hygiene, right? It's a machine, so it's making sure that you're putting the right fuel in the machine. And sometimes that's not really hard, right? It's just making sure you've got 16:9 video that has sound on, right? It's making sure that you have automated placements on. It's making sure that you have, for brand 2+ creative, for DR 3+ creative. Like, yes, all the insights and tasting and making sure that you're not wasting that, but all of that might be wasted if you don't even have the good hygiene, and you'd be surprised how big of a percentage of our clients' accounts just are missing some of those little things, and it makes such a big difference.
And I guess, Philip, from your point of view, like, what else, assuming the hygiene is in great condition and everyone is, doing the foundations really well, like from what you've seen either through creators or reels, like what are the do's and maybe even don'ts when it comes to understanding which elements have been proven successful or less successful, and anything you can share there from your experiences that you've had?
So I think with creative do's and don'ts, it depends a lot on like also what's the concept that you're doing, right? And they vary. They also vary by audience that you're targeting. So I think one higher level theme that's really important is you have to be consumer centric when you make your content, no matter what content it is that you're making. And with consumer centricity, I mean really understand who are those audience they're making content for, what's the context in which they're going to see that, and where are they in their decision making journey when they are seeing that ad. And so let's to give example for reels, like reels content, everyone talks already about it needs to be socially native to reels, but does that mean that you need to just hop on a trend on reels and try to make an ad around that reels trend, but face the risk of coming across as inauthentic because your brand messaging might not fit into that trend, but you're kind of forcing it in just because you think that's the approach? That's gonna probably not work. But if you think about why do people come to reels? Like, what is their original motivation of why they're watching Reels? And if you think of one of those motivations is they want to learn something new, they want to learn valuable information, or they want to get entertained. And then you think, okay, can I can I create useful information that works well with my brand value proposition or my product pitch? And so that's what I mean with the consumer centricity, is that you want to start with the consumer and like, why are they there? What are they looking for? And then, though, be careful that you are doing this in an authentic way, that it doesn't feel like that you are do a bait and switch, or that you are losing your brand voice or authenticity just because you're trying to fit in too hard.
Yeah. It makes us think again, Creative Shop, it's very aligned with like Creative Shop's mission of like um originating from culture and collaborating with culture, right? Which is like culture is happening on these platforms and it is Philip, you're you said the exact right thing, right? Is like, do I just jump on this trend? And that often, and you pinpointed it, that often breeds a little bit of inauthenticity. But I think if you take a collaborative mindset and look at what is happening with culture, but you're partnering with creators that you're already working with, you have a relationship with, you're going to start to find how you can collaborate with the right culture that's going to help um, uh, fuel your creative and increase performance versus just kind of coming off of like, a little bit of wrapping paper over what's happening right on the platform.
And so we've covered many different things that advertisers could think about when it comes to using creative as a real performance driver. But I think the key point there at the end is that, like, how to do that authentically without destroying, without letting go of your brand's values or trampling all over them to sort of stay with it in a sense and sort of stay on trend at the expense of everything else. And so, given all the things that we've touched upon, whether that's through, testing, creators, the different ways of thinking about approaching a new audience, like, what would be the one key thing if someone who isn't thinking in this way should start with after listening to our conversation today, that you really want them to take away and really, okay, internalize that, okay, if I'm going to do one thing really well, to sort of go on this journey of using creative as this performance differentiator going forward, like, where should I begin? Like, what's number one?
I mean, this might sound a little too simple, but just really using the platform and knowing, right, like, you being a seeing what is already happening there and knowing what the language is and seeing and feeling and living it is if you're a smaller brand or company, that's incredibly powerful. If you're a larger organization or you're not as plugged in, I think it's really starting to build those relationships with creators. I think is a really important place to start because they'll be able to translate that language to your brand. Philip?
I would say I mean, it's hard to pinpoint only one, but I think at the very core thing, one part is be hypothesis driven and strategic in the way how you do exploration. I think in a world where you are not talking about a few TV spots, where you talk about hundreds of different ads, and you're really pushing into that diversity of your ad portfolio, the risk of like creating a lot of crap that is not working and wasting your budget is very high. And so you have to be really strategic in the way how you expand your portfolio, meaning and the way what I mean with being strategic is being like a hypothesis driven of saying, okay, I'll just like make random stuff, but do stuff that you have a good indicator, strong indicator that it should be working, either coming from again like your IP, coming from data driven analysis in your account, or coming from consumer research, but then also being strategic in terms of like where are my biggest growth opportunities. I would say like a content creator, or not a content creator, but somebody who's building that ad portfolio needs to really think also like a CMO, thinking where are my biggest growth opportunities, where I'm going to invest, how much am I going to invest into it, and then also how do I manage my cost of testing to like not run out of money while building out that ad portfolio and trying to find the wins. So probably would say that as like the most important like thing to focus on in a world where again like content becomes cheap. Like you can get infinite amounts of content. With AI, it's gonna get even cheaper, right? So we're gonna get flooded with content, and so really really important to yeah, be strategic in the way of what you're testing and where you're going.
Yeah, and I'll just follow up, which is, I mean, it may be daunting, right? There's a lot here, and a lot that we talked about today. I think there's a lot of value in keeping it simple and really doing the first steps really really well, right? Of making sure that your work is optimal or your creative is optimal. Start with little tests, right? You don't have to boil the ocean, but start to just create this learning process where you're seeing performance. You even just do that, Jordan. Like that's going to be transformative for many many businesses.
Amazing. No, Philip, Chiwei, a big thanks for joining us today and really sharing your experiences. And I hope you enjoyed this episode on the importance of creative in performance marketing. There are links to any other resources mentioned in today's episode in the show notes. Thank you for listening to the Business, Innovation, and Technology podcast. Be sure to subscribe to get notified whenever a new episode is released and help us share these insights with others by leaving a 5-star review.